Good evening. Great to be with you this evening. Let me first acknowledge the Dharawal people whose country that I'm based on and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging here and wherever you might be based around the country. I also want to acknowledge the incredible strengths, the languages, the dreamings, the art, the culture of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and also to acknowledge the shameful history that we have: dispossession, the massacres, the stolen children, and as the Uluru Statement put it, the torment of their powerlessness. I wish that we were all in a room somewhere together celebrating this great awards evening, but it's probably best that we're not, given what's going on in the state and around the country and around the globe. This crisis that we are in, this global health, economic and social dislocation, is one that is such that we have not seen in generations. Now more than ever, I think, in our living history, we are in a space where the importance of our charities is coming to the fore. I see our charities as the strong threads in our social fabric. They stitch together the patchwork quilt that is our lives. They're the binds that connect us. They hold individuals and families and friends and communities and societies together. They keep those ties strong in good times, and they stitch us back together when they come unstuck. They support our most vulnerable, but they do so much more. Sometimes we recognise this and other times we take it for granted. Our charities care for our kids in our playgroups, in our daycare, in our preschools. They care for our ageing parents, our grandparents, our family members. They enable independence and inclusion for people with disabilities. They support and improve the mental health of our teenagers. They educate us. They improve our health and they cure our diseases. They research to solve our most pressing problems and come up with new innovations. They rescue our puppies and cure our injured wildlife. They organise our weekend sports, the ones that we play in and the ones that we watch. They run our museums and our cultural institutions. They're our places for prayer and our points of social connection. The value of our charities to our social fabric and on our quality of life is immeasurable. They're also critical to our economic productivity. The ACNC latest report found that our registered charities employ 1 in 10 of us across this country. They account for 8% of our GDP, and they engage over 3.7 million volunteers across this country. In November 2017, Deloitte Economics did a piece of work that valued the economic contribution of the charity sector at $129 billion. And they estimated that the volunteer hours that were contributed by volunteers at 328 million unpaid hours were worth the equivalent of around $12.8 billion in wages. Despite this value, this social and economic value that our charities provide, as the economy becomes more fragile and their demand for goods and services go up, they are also facing more fragility as their revenue decreases. Some will struggle to survive irrespective of this value to society. The cracks, some seismic in nature, have started to appear. We've seen cancellation of services and events due to social distancing measures, limited capacity to run activities, loss of volunteers, decreases of donations, and other income shocks have left some charities unable to pay some staff or deliver on their purpose. This isn't just about COVID. Prior to COVID-19, charities were already struggling. They were operating on thin margins while facing increasing demands. And in any for-profit business, an increase in demand would mean more revenue and actually a better bottom line usually. For our registered charities, while the increase in revenue in 2018 went up by 6.4%, their expenses grew by 8.5%. The average net income ratio, that's the size or the difference between the organisation's surplus or deficit as a percentage of their total income, was only 6.3%, much lower than 2017 and the lowest that we've seen over the last 4 years. This decreasing net income ratio shows that charities were already close to the bone before COVID, and they were already reporting increased demands on their services. Charities had limited discretionary funding, limited ability to invest in capacity building and infrastructure, limited ability to access new capital to smooth out impacts of shock, all sorts of stresses prior to COVID-19. But during the crisis, we have seen these things exacerbate. We have seen charities starting to see drops in revenue and drops in revenue that is tied and untied, which is particularly concerning because we know that flexible funding is what gives charities the capacity to meet needs and respond to crisis. The Centre for Social Impact's recent report, in partnership with the Social Ventures Australia, we modelled that if the revenue for charities with employees, paid employees, dropped by 20%, we looked at what would happen to those charities over the next year. What we found was alarming. Almost 9 in 10 charities would be making an immediate operating loss. Over 1 in 6 would be at risk of closing their doors within 6 months because their reserves would run out. And what we also modelled was that there was a risk of more than 200,000 jobs being lost in the sector. On top of what those job losses might mean in terms of the functioning of charities and the support that they provide for society, in addition to that, many of these employees are women. They're employees on low to moderate incomes, and they're usually pushing money straight back into the economy as a result. So losing these jobs has implications not just for our charity sector, not just for the implication of what that means for society, but also on gender inequality and the economy overall. We know that JobKeeper has been a really useful tool to keep charities operating and to enable them to continue to employ staff. But the October cliff is looming. In October, we could see that grim reality of over 200,000 jobs being lost. There are serious implications, not just the ones that I've outlined, but also the cost of not doing business. And we know the cost of not doing business, the cost of social dislocation are really high. All we need to look is the cost of what happens when we don't intervene early or early enough. Let me just give you 3 examples. Australia spends $15.2 billion each year because our kids and our children and our young people experience serious issues that require crisis interventions. The average person who's homeless costs the government over $25,000 a year. And we know that poor educational performance and educational inequity directly affects our long-term GDP and the economy's growth. So before COVID, we already saw charities struggling to meet needs across communities. During COVID, we have seen them become under increasing financial pressure, while at the same time the demand for their services has increased. Without further support, we know that charities are going to be in trouble. They need our support now and into the future. What can we do about it? Our report has called for 6 recommendations. We're calling on the government to create a ramp, not a cliff, for job seeker, and allowing charities to continue to ramp off JobKeeper to enable them to keep employing staff. We're calling for the creation of a charities transformation fund to help charities transition to whatever the new normal might look like. We're calling for not just governments, but also philanthropists and other funders to actually pay what it takes. Pay charities what it costs to deliver services effectively, and we know there has been underfunding for some time. We're calling for governments to retain job seeker at the higher level to enable to keep people out of poverty and to make sure that we mitigate the demand that we might see on charities should that payment go back to keeping people below the poverty line. We're calling on making fundraising and philanthropy simpler. And importantly, we need more research. We don't have all the answers. We need to better understand the capability of the for purpose sector to meet its purpose and deliver on that purpose, and to make sure that we can all build back better into the future. We need our charities to be partners in COVID recovery, not COVID casualties. The cost of social dislocation is too high. The value of our charities in terms of the threads of social fabric that they hold together and the benefit they bring to all of us is immense. I congratulate the Melbourne Women's Donor Fund for the great work that you've been doing over a number of years, and appeal to you to give what you can, where you can, in your time and or your money, to untie funding wherever you can to enable charities to do what they do best. I wish the charities who are up for funding all the best in what's going to be announced and awarded, and congratulate all of you for continuing to make our society much stronger. Have a fabulous evening. Good luck. Keep your humanities and your values close, and take care.